Hello, welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot. As you know, I'm Big Italy 42. He's Scott Mail. We got Sports 25 to life, and we're talking about tonight's slate. Tuesday, obviously a big slate as it always is. Tuesdays and Fridays usually a pretty packed slate. There's one early game. It's the first half of a doubleheader for the Dodgers and Rockies game. So obviously, if you wanted to add yourself, you get two Coors games if you make your custom all-day games. If you really want to go that route, but not for me. You're obviously going to be speculating on your lineups and everything anyway. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get things started off at the top here with the pitchers. Max Scherzer has a tough matchup against Toronto, but he does face Marco Estrada on the other side, and he is at home. And he's also just been absolutely incredible this season. Just looking at his numbers, just ridiculous. So for $12,000, yes, he's expensive, but I think you're going to definitely need to get yourself some exposure because some of these other guys up at the top, you don't have a whole lot of faith in a lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's far and away the best option, I think. I like Cueto quite a bit at 10-4 right behind him, but, I mean, Scherzer's looked really, really good. Cueto has a better win potential here, it feels like, but Scherzer's just been money with strikeouts. I mean, basically everything. He's been going deep into games every game, basically. I think for this slate, I'm going to try and pitch both of these guys for the most part if I can.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy.
Yeah, it was something we talked about yesterday with Felix and one of the other big guys like DeGrom, and I think it's even more prevalent today. I mean, there's not nearly as many aces on the mound. There's some quality guys. I'm sure we'll talk about a couple more of these guys here in a minute, but, I mean, there's no one else that really measures up to either of these two. So as much as I can, I'm going to try and play both of them. If you're looking to load up hitting, fading Scherzer and playing Cueto as your pitcher one on DraftKings is the way to go, obviously. If you're not too worried about picking out value hitters, which on a big slate like this where every team is playing, you're going to be able to find them if you want them.
Yeah.
So I think Scherzer's very, very in play. I think he'll be pretty heavily owned. But as far as price goes, I think it's really hard to argue with Cueto also.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, you're going to need to get yourself at least one of those two guys, I would say, in your cash games, if not both. Your other option, as far as elite guys go, at least this season, is going to be Chris Archer, $8,900. Gets the Angels, who they're starting to hit a little bit better, but still down near the bottom. Coming off one of the most tough luck losses, or not a loss, but no decision in his last game.
Yep.
8 innings, just 2 hits, 12 Ks against Seattle. On paper, this is not a better offense than Seattle, but we all know better. This is actually a better offense than the Mariners. So he's certainly in play for your cash games, too, if you wanted to go that route. I think I'll probably play in more GPPs. I'm going to go with those top guys. But then when you look at another option for GPPs, Carlos Carrasco, he is facing a Kansas City team that, as we know, doesn't strike out hardly at all, but he had a good performance against them in Kansas City a couple weeks back. 7 innings, 3 earned, 6K. That's probably about what you expect out of this one. I mean, you're not expecting 10 Ks, 8 innings, anything like that. So he's got capped upside, I'll say. So GPP, probably more like a secondary cash game now that you really think about it, though, really, for him.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit more like that. One of the other more expensive guys that I like on this slate is Chris Archer against the Angels. They've struggled quite a bit against righties. Archer's coming off a few good games out of the last, I want to say 4. I think he's had 3 really nice outings, if I remember correctly. No, he's 4 of his last 4 with 20-plus DraftKings points. Obviously, had that really nice game against Seattle with 40 points and 12 strikeouts in 8 innings last time out. He's looked great lately. He looked great to start the season, too. He had that 2-game stretch right in the middle against Baltimore and Texas where he struggled a little bit. But outside of that, he's been really impressive, especially with the strikeouts. He's been getting deep into games. I think he's pitched 7 or more innings 5 times already this year. He's probably my high-priced GPP option today because I don't think he's going to be owned nearly as much as Scherzer and Cueto. Not as much of a favorite in this one. This is more like a pick-em, if anything, with C.J. Wilson on the mound for the Angels against the Tampa Bay team that really hasn't been hitting. That's been the biggest thing holding Archer back, is not being able to get wins because Tampa Bay hasn't been hitting.
Yeah.
But I love him as a GPP play tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, if you look at his peripherals, I mean, he's right along there with Max Scherzer. Just 30.7% strikeout rate to 30.4. Much higher ground ball rate, left on base percentage similar, home run rate similar. So I don't mind you saving a couple K and getting him in a bunch of spots as well. And a guy that we wanted to play yesterday, but the game got postponed. Assuming the weather's fine again, it's going to be Clay Buchholz in tournament, $7,200 against Minnesota. He's certainly in play. Once you look past him and look at these really cheap options, there's really only one guy that I'm even considering just a little bit, and it would be Chris Heston. because he has been really good at times. Struggled a little bit with lefties, but not a lot of lefties in this lineup you're really worried about. You got Polanco, Neil Walker as a switch hitter, but outside of that, I mean, this guy's got huge upside. Had a big-time game against Houston. Weird, like we always see. 10 strikeouts.
Talked about that one yesterday. They're just known for giving up 10 strikeouts to starters these days. I mean, everybody's doing it against them, but I mean, they're putting some runs on the board, but Heston's done a great job keeping the ball on the ground. When you couple that with the ability to actually strike people out like he has, I mean, he had 12. I think he had another 10 strikeout game earlier in the season, and I mean, it's incredible that he's still priced so low is the crazy thing. What is he today? 5,300?
Yeah. Crazy
against Pittsburgh. And out of, I think, 8 starts so far this season, 9 starts so far this season, he's been 18-plus DraftKings points in 5 out of the 8. Yep. So, I mean, he's been surprisingly good. He had that, like you said, complete game, 10 strikeout game against Houston. His last time out, he had a really nice game against Atlanta with over 7 innings pitched, 6 strikeouts. He's a great value play today, and he's going to be until against basically any offense that's not elite until they move his price up.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So that's the only cheap option we're really looking at for tonight. As we move on to catcher, Carlos Santana, pretty much anyone against Jeremy Guthrie. I mean, I know he's much worse against lefties and righties. Obviously, Santana switch hitter. You're going to want to get yourself a piece of Guthrie. We saw what happened to him when he faced the Yankees in a less than ideal matchup, and they absolutely slaughtered him. I think it was 10 or 11 runs, 2 innings. So he got crushed. Stephen Vogt against a righty and Alfredo Simon, who has been very good against righties, not good against lefties. Going to love him in some tournaments as well. Those are the pricey guys I'm looking at here for tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I like most of those guys. I think they're all decent plays. I'll be looking, as usual, for a value catcher that hits a little bit higher in the order. We haven't really seen that too much lately. I mean, most of the catchers in the majors right now are defensive-oriented guys that have a little bit of power, if anything, and they're all hitting 7, 8 in lineups for the most part. A.J. Pierzynski's one guy that I don't mind today for 3,300 against Cole Mentor. Nice lefty-righty matchup. He hasn't been great lately, but with the wind blowing out to right, I feel like that's going to be a pretty decent play. Outside of that, I mean, I'm probably paying up for one of those catchers you mentioned.
Yeah, and I mean, your other guys, your normal top options, guys like Russell Martin, Derek Norris, both in tough matchups. Not paying for either of those guys tonight. As we look on to first base, Paul Goldschmidt, your most expensive option, got a really tough matchup against Shelby Miller. Obviously, you're not really paying that price like outside of tournaments to try to chase his hot streak right now. Of course, Adrian Gonzalez in Coors Field, certainly in play there. When you're looking down a little bit further, you got Todd Frazier against the awful Sean O'Sullivan. Obviously, not in Great American, but he's going to be more of a third base option for me, of course.
Yeah, I love Votto in this one, actually, against O'Sullivan. I think he's a great play, even at 4,700. I don't really love paying that price for him since he hasn't had a ton of power this season, but I think he's a really strong play. Another guy up in that price range, Freddie Freeman against Cole Mentor. He jumped up quite a bit in price after yesterday. He was only 4,300. Lucas Duda, I don't love at San Diego, but for 4,300, I think he's a decent play for a guy that doesn't hit a ton of home runs anyway.
Yeah, and I'll throw out a really awesome tournament option. I'll probably be playing him more in the outfield, but you could certainly consider him at first as Brandon Moss. Power lefty against Jeremy Guthrie. Obviously, big ballpark there in KC, but Brandon Moss doesn't care what kind of ballpark it's in if he gets a hold of one. So I think he's a great option. And then as you're looking at cheaper guys, just not a whole lot to love.
I'll be spending at first base like always.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not even going to consider a lot of these cheap guys. I'll throw out Billy Butler against Alfredo Simon if you have to go cheap.
Yeah, don't hate that. You mentioned Brandon Moss against Guthrie. I'm sure moving on to second base here, Jason Kipnis is a fantastic play against Guthrie today.
Yeah.
Just been absolutely fantastic. If there's one second baseman that's worth over 5,000 right now, it's him. He actually has a pretty crazy batter versus pitcher sample size, too. I think he's got 28 at-bats, and he's hitting 500 against him.
Yeah,
which is
and you
pretty
expect
incredible.
that number is going to rise again tonight, too.
Yeah, I mean, Guthrie's not good. Kipnis has just been absolutely mashing righties. I feel like that's probably almost as close as you can get to a must-play on this slate, especially with, like, Altuve and Dozier both facing righties. Cano's facing a lefty. There's really not a lot else to like at second base, so he's going to be in a ton of my lineups for this one. The one cheaper guy that I looked at a decent amount is Jace Peterson against Cole Mentor. I like basically all those Atlanta lefties against Cole Mentor.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Another guy down here cheaper a little bit. Brandon Phillips has been hitting the ball pretty well, $3,900. He gets Sean O'Sullivan. We know Sean O'Sullivan awful. I'm with you there on Jace Peterson. Nice cheap play again. Should be hitting near the top of that order. Outside of that, you get Ricky Weeks against the lefties, so you don't mind him at 31 if he's got a decent lineup spot if he's in. But
yeah,
you don't love it.
One dirt cheap guy for Tampa Bay if he's playing and is in the lineup against a lefty, which he's been in the lineup almost every day lately. Actually, 6 days in a row now between the 6 and 8 spots. Is Jake Elmore is exactly 2,000. He hit 6th in both of the first 2 games he played against lefties against Seattle. Had 4 RBI in one of them, 2 doubles in the other one. His minor league numbers show he's pretty good against lefties. I don't know if he has that much power with doubles and RBIs, but I mean we've already seen him do it at the major league level, so it'll be interesting to see. One of his starts was actually against C.J. Wilson already, I believe, who he faces tonight. So I think he's a pretty interesting play at 2,000 if he's up in the 6 or 7 spot.
Yeah, that's a great call. I mean, he could be the Jimmy Paredes of this week maybe if we get him in there at 2K. Kind of see him as a popular play, slot him in, save yourself some money, and load up on some other big bets. Another big bat that's in play here is going to be Miguel Cabrera, of course, against Kendall Graveman. If you want to pay, always seems to be the contrarian way to go is playing him at third base, certainly in play there. Other options you've got here, if you want an ultimate contrarian play, you get Josh Donaldson against Max Scherzer. He's been on fire. He's 4,300. Got a cheaper price due to the tough matchup. Elsewhere, not a whole lot that you love with these guys. You got Yasmani Tomas has been hitting the ball pretty well if you want another contrarian play against Shelby Miller. Not a place I'll be really going. Probably Justin Turner, assuming he's hitting second again, $4,000. I'll be looking his way as well.
If you're spending up, I love Chris Bryant against the lefty in hand for Miami. He's 5,000, but another one of those guys that really feels like he's worth it in this one. If you're looking a little bit cheaper, Alex Rodriguez faces a weak lefty for Seattle Montgomery. He's the one guy on the Yankees that I really like against lefties. It kind of hurts his RBI potential, but I mean he's just been crushing lefties, and when he does have people on, he's been driving them in. I like him quite a bit. I'll probably be spending up at third base today. I don't really like any of the cheap guys that much. I'm going to go cheap probably at shortstop and in the outfield today.
Yeah.
There's one guy at shortstop specifically that I like who's really cheap. Elmore is one of them. I think he's a fantastic play if he's in the lineup. He has second base and shortstop eligibility. I like him quite a bit because you can pair him with Kipnis on DraftKings. You can't do that on FanDuel where they're both second basemen.
Good point.
The other guy I really like is this Hanser Alberto guy that's a flat 2,000 for Texas. I don't love him against Samardzija, but for 2,000, he has some really good speed, and if he can get on, he can steal bases. He has a triple and 4 total hits on the season, and he's only played 3 games so far. He's a decent prospect for them. I think he's pretty interesting. I don't love that he's hitting in the 8-9 holes right now, but I think between these two guys at 2,000 at shortstop, you can do a lot cheap-wise.
Yeah, I mean, even if you decide to throw in 2 of those, you can get 2 top pitching options and some big bats right there.
That's the way you almost have to go. If you play both of those guys and you can go Scherzer and Cueto, I mean, that's a pretty good start to your roster. You're going to average almost 4,000 the rest of the way, which is a pretty strong lineup to go with those 2 really good pitching options.
Yeah, no doubt. And give yourself a nice high floor as well with those guys.
Yep.
Elsewhere at shortstop, I'm not paying Jimmy Rollins' price tag. Talked about this yesterday. Not in that matchup. Hanley Ramirez, 5,100 against Pelfrey, certainly in play. Some of these other expensive guys you really just don't like. Johnny Peralta, we don't know who he's facing yet. They haven't announced the starter yet. It's early, but at 3,900, he seems to just be the go-to for me in cash if I'm paying up a little bit. He's got power. He's got a nice high floor, and then I'll throw out Jung Ho Gong as well at $3,700 against Heston for a tournament play at 37.
Yeah, the only other guy I like is a tournament play, Starlin Castro at 4,000 against a lefty. He hasn't been anything special lately, but he's been pretty good against lefties. He's been hitting 4th in the order almost exclusively for the last 2 weeks. So he's got a great spot in that batting order for the Cubs, right around Rizzo, Bryant, all those guys hitting right around him. He hasn't been overly impressive as far as power for a cleanup hitter, but it's pretty hard to argue with the shortstop with his upside in both hitting and stolen bases. So I'm going to look at him in GPPs a decent amount, but like I said, shortstop's probably one of the positions I'm going cheap at with the elite options at like 1st, 2nd, and 3rd today. And then I'm also going to look pretty cheap in the outfield unless there's someone you really like out here, other than the obvious Michael Brantley, who's probably going to be the highest owned outfielder.
Yeah, and he should be. I definitely love Brantley, but I mean, that's no surprise to anyone. And Nelson Cruz against the lefty and Sabathia. Yes, it is at home, but
Yeah,
certainly
that's
going
a
to be
good
considering
too.
him as well. So I think those are your top two options. Of course, Bryce Harper always in play, but we don't need to tell you that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's no one else really high priced that I love at outfield today. I mean, you mentioned Brandon Moss already. He's 4,600, so that's kind of a tough pill to swallow when you can just play Michael Brantley for 4,900 or Cruz, like you mentioned. As far as cheap guys go, there's a decent amount of cheap guys on the slate today, though. We mentioned Ethier yesterday. He's not super cheap, but at 4,000, he's probably one of the best values out there if he's in the lineup, depending on who's starting for Colorado today. Um, Another interesting cheap guy is Justin Ruggiano against Sabathia. Has been hitting lefties pretty well lately. I want to say he led off last game because Steph Smith has been just terrible against lefties lately. They've been playing Ruggiano over him as a split there, and he's been taking his first spot in the order. That's a steal at 3,200, even though Sabathia is a decent pitcher. I mean, 3,200 for a guy leading off against his good split. I like that quite a bit.
Yeah, I'll throw out one more cheap guy. He's been batting second at times against righties. Is Gerardo Parra
Yeah.
for $3,000. Certainly don't mind him. He's a guy. He's got a decent amount of power for a guy at that price tag, so you don't mind him. Kike Hernandez, you can play him in the outfield or second base, 3,100. Gets David Hale, not a good pitcher in Coors Field. So if you want a cheap piece of Coors, I think that's a good way to go for you there.
Yeah, you mentioned the Oakland guys too against Simon. Billy Burns, he's up to 3,500 now. Obviously, that's not the steal he was when he was floating around 2,500. But when he's hitting leadoff, I mean, he's a great play with his speed.
Yeah, and another speed guy, Cameron Maben, $3,300 against Josh Colmenter.
Yeah, sat out
Colmenter's
yesterday
just been
too.
average at best.
Yeah, he sat out yesterday. Should be in good shape for that good matchup. Not a ton else I'm loving in the middle there. I'm probably going expensive or cheap at a lot of positions today. I think it's a little bit of a studs and scrubs day, which doesn't happen a ton in baseball. Usually there's like one 2,000 guy that I like on DraftKings, and then I'm kind of mixing in a bunch of 4,000 guys that I think have good matchups. But today, I mean, they did a really good job in pricing, it feels like, and they priced up a lot of the guys in good matchups. So we're going to have to figure out a way to construct lineups around that.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun night. Obviously, with these pitchers, a couple viable options. So with that, that's going to do it for us. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out all of our content for tonight and every other day at dailyfantasycafe.com.